Hello, and welcome to Horns of a Dilemma, the podcast of the Texas National Security Review, TNSR. I'm Doyle Hodges, Executive Editor of TNSR. I can't believe my eyes. This is a phrase many of us have uttered if we saw an amazing play in a sporting event or something else that took us by surprise. In this week's episode of Horns, Professor Sandra Fahey of Carleton University in Canada explores what happens when we can't believe our eyes in response to video evidence adduced by states in response to claims of human rights abuses. While many of us might think of the art of doctored video as being a product of relatively modern technology such as deepfakes, Fahey traces the history back to the early 20th century, including the Soviet Union in 1927 and all the way through to present-day Israel and China and the Taliban government in Afghanistan. This is a fascinating talk that pulls together interesting threads of political science, of human rights, of philosophy, of being, as well as how it is that we know what we know, epistemology itself. This talk was hosted by the Asia Policy Program at the Strauss and Clement Center at the University of Texas, Austin, and is introduced by Professor Sheena Greitens of the LBJ School at the University of Texas, Austin. Let's listen in.
Welcome, everyone, to this event that's hosted by the Asia Policy Program, a joint initiative of the Clements and the Strauss Centers at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm very pleased today to be able to welcome Dr. Sandra Fahey, who's an associate professor in international and global studies with the Kroger School of Public Affairs at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. She is the author of two absolutely terrific and troubling books on North Korea, both with Columbia University Press. The first, which is called Marching Through Suffering, which I have here, is a really gripping look at the North Korean famine and how it unfolded across time and space in one of the most horrific incidents of human tragedy at the end of the 20th century. Sandra's second book, called Dying for Rights, Putting North Korean Human Rights Abuses on the Record, is probably the seminal work on North Korea's long-standing pattern of gross human rights violations, in addition to the United Nations Commission of Inquiry report, which came out in 2014. Sandra's now writing a book titled States, Lies, and Video, A Century of States Using Video to Deny Human Rights Abuses. And that project forms the basis for her talk at the Asia Policy Program today. I'm very pleased to welcome her. I wish that we could be welcoming her to Austin in person, but Sandra, I hope we'll get you down here another time to join us in person. And in the meantime, I'm very pleased to offer you a warm digital welcome to the Asia Policy Program and the Clements and Strauss Centers at UT. I'll turn it over to you for your opening remarks, and then we'll turn to discussion. So thanks, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Sheena. It's my great pleasure to be here. I look forward to sharing my talk with you folks today, and I just want to express a special thanks to, of course, Professor Sheena Greitens for inviting me, Caroline Nicholson, and Elizabeth Doty for helping to arrange the event today, and of course to thank the University of Texas at Austin and the Asia Policy Program at the Strauss and Clement Center for National Security. So this is a project that is in progress, and as such, that means I look forward to getting your insights on how I can make this the best book possible. I'm going to be kind of sharing with you how I came upon the idea for this study, and also bringing you through some specific case studies related to East Asia. Although the cases span the globe and almost an entire century, depending on when I publish the book, as the first case study I have is from 1927. So basically, this book examines the phenomenon whereby nation states use video to deny allegations of human rights abuses, or they use video to cover up allegations of rights abuse. So you'll see that video's doing a lot of heavy lifting here. We've got CCTV, we have handheld video from mobile phones, etc. So the first case I have is from the 1927's Soviet Union, and the most recent case I have is from the Islamic Emirate state of Afghanistan, with the Taliban happening just about a month ago. But let me just tell you how the birth of this study began. I was watching silent footage from a CCTV camera that was aired, I think it was on BBC, and this footage came from Istanbul in 2018. And this is the man, Jamal Khashoggi, whose extrajudicial killing inspired me to investigate this phenomenon further. In early October 2018, the BBC reported that Jamal Khashoggi, a famous dissident journalist of the Washington Post, disappeared after visiting the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. His fiancée was waiting for him outside. He had gone in there to get some paperwork to approve their marriage, and he never emerged. Saudi Arabian authorities said he had indeed exited the consulate, and they pointed to CCTV footage captured from different parts of the city of Istanbul to demonstrate this truth. So here you can see footage on the left of Mr. Khashoggi, and this is when he is entering the consulate. And on the right, you can see a depiction. Also, you could call this a curation, a fiction, a costumed actor of Khashoggi leaving the Saudi embassy in Istanbul. The authorities arranged a body double to wear Khashoggi's clothes and his glasses, but you can see that the gentleman on the right was not willing to shave his head to become bald like Jamal Khashoggi, or he wasn't able to shrink his feet to fit into Khashoggi's shoes. So this is something within academia that many have called an act of surveiller, the opposite of surveillance. Surveiller happens from below, so you are aware that you're being surveilled from above, and you alter your behavior accordingly. So here we have the state of Saudi directing the actions and costume of this man as Khashoggi from below to be observed, recorded, and circulated to deceive. So this lookalike is sent out to be captured throughout the city of Istanbul. And it's a parallel with how the state captured and controlled the real body of Jamal Khashoggi, as the state ensures the capture of the body double on CCTV. The state frees itself from culpability, or at least tries to. It creates an alibi for the Saudi state, or at least creates plausible deniability. Now, of course, we're looking at this photo, and many journalists have pointed out that this is a fake, and we can come to that in a moment, but just stay with me as I observe this phenomenon of, states using video. So the Saudi state wants the body double to be Khashoggi, but of course it's emptied of Khashoggi's being. The body double is a metonym. It's an attempted yoking of the state and Khashoggi. So we could call this like biopolitics par excellence. So we have a yoking of the state of Saudi and Khashoggi. The state as Khashoggi Khashoggi as the state would like him to be, emptied entirely of his dissidents. So something about this moment of footage resonated in my memory in an uncanny way to research I conducted for my second book, Dying for Rights, Putting North Korea's Rights Abuse on the Record. I had just finished writing that book and sent it to Columbia University Press. And so when I saw this footage of the body double on CCTV, it reminded me of another case. And I will show you that now. In this second case, we also have CCTV being repurposed. So you have a more reputable state, shall I say, than Saudi Arabia, like Turkey. And in this case, more reputable state than the DPRK. We had Malaysia. Here we have another man in another city killed by another state. In this case, the state staged from below, again, an act of surveiller, dressed the assassins accordingly. So we'll go to that case now. Maybe some of you recognize this CCTV footage from Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia. This is February 13th, 2017. And this gentleman you can see in the bright circular shape is Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and he is in the departures hall. He is approached from behind, and sorry, this image is a bit pixelated, but it's the best I could get, by a woman wearing white. She puts her hands over his face and she presses a cloth into his face, and this carries a VX nerve agent on it, a weapon of mass destruction. And Kim Jong-nam rushes to security, which is outside the door, and explains what happened to him. He's taken to the airport infirmary where doctors are unsure of what's happened to him, and they try to help him, but they're unaware of what's happened, and he dies from the attack. Two women, one Vietnamese, the other Indonesian, are arrested for the murder. And again, this is quite a pixelated image, but you can see a woman wearing a t-shirt that says LOL, laugh out loud. And the women, they claim once they were arrested that they were duped into the act. They say they thought they were taking part in a reality TV prank. And you can see the LOL on her t-shirt. And I find both this LOL and the reference to reality TV quite evocative of kind of Anglo-democratic spaces where these sorts of ideas of playing pranks and having reality TV, of course not exclusive to Anglo-democratic spaces, but kind of resonate with that. The feature of evoking reality TV is, I think, a leitmotif of television under democracy. And this, rather, is reality TV up to a new level. So these curated performances from below play with reality. They show us a seemingly accidental or incidental phenomenon. They play with the sense of, quote, what really happened. The footage injects into the question of these rights violations the plausible deniability of the state's culpability. What the CCTV footage captures is misinformation, even as the CCTV footage itself remains unmanipulated. Because the acts are happening in surveillance, happening from below, they capture the curation. It's not happening in post-production. So in each of these cases, the state perpetrators of Saudi Arabia and North Korea use surveillance, acting from below, to trick the state surveillance of Turkey and Malaysia into capturing footage that attempts to exculpate the crimes of North Korea and Saudi Arabia. So these are visual alternative facts, a la Kellyanne Conway, but they go further. By using video, they reach a level of plausibility for their alternative stories. And in my study, I found that looking at historic cases, even still, these curations from the past, and I'm talking from 1943, 1944, are used to deny horrendous crimes against humanity that have happened. So what happened and what it means seem at once fixed and unfixed. These cases might seem new, but we have actually always been here, I would argue, since video ever came along. States using video to deny their abuses toward us, citizens or non-citizens. So as these two cases settled into my mind, I began to think of others that bore resemblances to these. And of course, at the time I was living in East Asia. And really, it doesn't matter where you live nowadays. You are going to be meeting up with China's and Russia's video curations. And of course, not only those two states, but many more. So I began to ask, were these iterations of the same tool using different techniques? Kind of what was going on here? Is this a case of an alibi created through deliberate accidents, captured on more reputable state CCTV cameras? So basically, what is what is all this connection between video and human rights denial? So the cases that I have found are quite diverse. I'll explain to you how I found those cases. But first, let me just introduce you to a few questions that I'm using to help shape my study. So the framing questions are these. How have states used video to exculpate their responsibility for rights violations? Is video used to deny certain rights abuses, such as assassination, rather than others? So, for instance, discrimination. What video techniques are used? Forced confession, vlogging, mass demonstrations. And finally, does the footage nevertheless bear evidence of guilt? And this kind of comes out through my interest in true crime, where even video itself, I think, still bears a kind of fingerprint of evidence for guilt. And although I have to say, in many of the cases that I've looked at, particularly videos from China, they are incredibly savvy, and it's quite difficult to find evidence. So it appears that some crimes are going without evidence of guilt. Well, let me take you to another case. Again, this isn't related to Asia, but we're going to get there with more emphasis in a moment. Here we have CCTV footage again, doing the heavy lifting for states. Here we have two assassins captured on CCTV in Salisbury, England. This is March 4th, 2018. And these two men attempted to assassinate former KGB officer Sergei Skripal. They did succeed in poisoning him and his daughter Yulia with Novichok, a nerve agent, again, a weapon of mass destruction, but they didn't manage to kill these two individuals. Now, when British intelligence accused Russia of leading an assassination attempt, Russia responded with video. And we can understand why they would respond with video, because you get to curate it. Not surprisingly, Russia did this with RT, Russia Today. And I have to admit, I do find it sort of humorous that Russia Today uses the slogan "Question More" for its tagline. Here we have the two men on camera for an interview with Russia Today. They are questioning more, but this echoes the spirit of the Russian state: question everything, answer nothing. And the men explained that they were visiting a cathedral in the area. And if you look at the link below, you can take a screenshot, you can watch the full video. What I found quite interesting is the kind of multiplicity of online platforms that were used to further furnish this lie. So evidence of their trip had been logged on social media by the two gentlemen, each making a separate review on TripAdvisor. Again, this is probably a bit grainy. These reviews have been taken down from TripAdvisor now, but the men wrote it was an eventful trip, and one of them gave 5 stars of the cathedral, but no mention, of course, was made of the assassination attempt. The two men were not convincing. There are logical oddities in their stories. So, for instance, they complained of too much snow in Salisbury, even though there was only a light dusting of snow. And this, they said, limited their trip through the city to the cathedral. But what's odd is that in Russia, where they had come from Moscow, there was a tremendous amount of snow, and that didn't prohibit their departure. So, when these doubts were brought up, Russian news doubled down with another narrative. In this case, they used a voice actor. Now, this aspect of voice, which we see with these two assassins, is something that I'm going to bring up again a bit later. So we not only have the bodies of individuals being used, but also voices. Up to this point in the cases that I'm looking at, like I said, with Kim Jong-nam, Jamal Khashoggi, we don't have speech necessarily. But in this case, you can see a sort of, a TV panel brought together with an audience. On the right, you can see the face of Yulia, who is the young victim of the assassination, which was aimed at her father, a former KGB officer. Here, Yulia is speaking to her cousin from her hospital bed in the UK. And this news investigation took place 1 year after the attempted assassination. It took that long for Yulia to recover, and she was still in recovery. So this 1-hour news conference also involved submitting a 52-page report to the United Nations and increased coverage denouncing the reports of the British intelligence for allegations against these two men. So from her British hospital bed, Yulia expressed that she was fine. And by using the voice of Yulia in this news conference, Russia employs a special tool familiar to testimony. Those of us who work on human rights know that the voice of the witness or the voice of the survivor is extremely important. And this is something key that I hope to evoke throughout this study, is this notion of testimony, the victim speaking on behalf of the experiences that she has had, either condemning the state or condemning the party who is guilty for her human rights abuses that she's suffered. So this is a standard impulse within human rights activism to have the survivor speak. But what we see here is the survivor, we could say, being abused again, instead of instances in human rights where the voice makes that which is internal and inaccessible external and accessible. What we see here is it's making what is unknown known. So here we have the state in the survivor. I call this, in my second book, the act of ventriloquism. The state is a ventriloquist throwing its voice into the body of the citizen, whether the citizen wants it or not. We can see this in many cases throughout my study. This thing I say about the voice being internal and inaccessible, the voice connects us to the other. There's some great work by the scholar Mladen Delor. He has a book called Voice and Nothing More, where he talks about the voice taking what is internal and making it external, connecting us with others. So let me just briefly show you some of the connections, intellectual connections I'm making across this subject, and then I'll bring in another few cases. So I'm looking throughout the book at this issue of video, voice, and affect, and I'm blending these together because video is quite synesthetic. It makes us feel as if we are present in a space where we are not. It makes us feel as if we are seeing everything when we are not. Things are clearly curated. So you can see a few scholars that I'm looking at there. Also surveillance or surveiller, scholarship on face recognition and deep fakes. My work kind of complements that work, but also acknowledges that the vast majority of the world still gets information through television as opposed to directly internet online information. Another area of connection, again, I said deep fake or artificial intelligence. And I'm also connecting issues of show trials, propaganda, performance studies, cinematic theory. And finally, work on totalitarianism, authoritarianism. We should really say totalitarianisms nowadays, authoritarianisms, and also looking at human rights activism and derogation. And I'm going to come to that at the end. But let me just refer back to some specific cases in Asia. So this speaks directly to something that I uncovered in my second book. And if you take a look at this image, it's a picture from a demonstration which was videoed in Pyongyang in November 2014. This is 9 months after the United Nations submitted a report which was published identifying crimes against humanity happening inside North Korea. Now, these gentlemen, you can see, this is a still from a video. They are carrying placards which say, let's smash the human rights report. Let's completely reject the resolution on human rights. Let's trample on human rights and unite. So, of course, you look at this image and you can see that there are some overwhelming consistencies that suggest curation. They're all men. They all look to be about the same age. The posters appear to be penned with similar font, using similar paint. They are about the same size, et cetera, et cetera. So there are lots of things which suggest staging. They all have the same haircut, for instance. They're all using the same physical body gesture. So also along with this, in November 2014, a strange thing began to appear in North Korean state media. In Pyongyang Square, North Korea organized this protest against the UN report. Now, some people might say, well, how can I know that they organized this demonstration? And of course, I will explain that in a moment with the kind of forensic analysis I did of North Korean video. But the United Nations report that was published in 2014 precipitated a shift from North Korea, and it precipitated them into this phenomenon that I call an ersatz civil society, basically a fake or a manufactured civil society. North Korea is a country without a civil society. We can see this curation of ersatz civil society in several other countries as well. Some scholars call it gongos. You might have heard of it. It's a fascinating phenomenon that's occurring all around the United Nations. Government organized, non-governmental organizations, gongos. Another term for them could be ersatz civil society or fake civil society. In this case, I call it an ersatz civil society because these gentlemen flawlessly echo the state rhetoric on human rights. In the fall of 2014, the Central News Agency of North Korea interviewed 3 population groups about the United Nations report. So this was a case where North Korea actually went to their people on the street and said to them, what do you think of the Human Rights Report? This was quite unprecedented, actually, for North Korea. North Korea began to do something which addressed their flaw in how they responded to the United Nations Commission of Inquiry report. Here was the flaw. The United Nations said to North Korea, participate with us. We are open to you working with us to identify if, in fact, crimes against humanity are happening or not happening within your country. I believe twice the United Nations Commission of Inquiry approached North Korea and said, we would like to work with you. And North Korea completely ignored those requests. Instead, North Korea began to champion their access without access, as I call it. They began to develop a celluloid or a video production of access for the international community, which to me just speaks profoundly of their guilt, of course. So North Korea also began to interview man on the street, family members of defectors and returned defectors. If you look at North Korea's website, Uri Minjokgiri, it's mentioned in my second book, you can see that there are tons of documentaries, I think over 100, which interview family members of North Korean defectors, friends, neighbors, co-workers who then denounce these individuals. But again, as I show in my second book, forensic analysis of these videos show a clear curation of these messages. And I can go into detail about how that happens. So North Korea's news agency was soliciting a response from these groups, and my analysis of their responses shows their responses precisely mirror the state discourse in its entire subtle nuance. So what we have here is a singular, the state, made to appear as a plural. So with these gentlemen, they are a plural inherently, but the state's message is singular. And this is profoundly totalitarian, trying to appear as a plurality when it is in fact a singularity. So the state media responded by operationalizing the citizen voice, but like I say, it was emptied of its kind of bespoke nuance and given the message of the state. So not just state representatives are incorporated, but ordinary people also. So North Korea literally began what I call a talkback campaign through ordinary people, and this all emerged in the wake of the United Nations report. So before I show you that, I just want to stress this is a critical point because, as I say, North Korea had been invited to participate in the inquiry and they ignored the request. And North Korea's primary accusation against the United Nations report is that it's been conducted with defectors. So these are people who have left North Korea and as such, they cannot be trusted. China levels the same critique toward individuals who are Uyghur who are abroad. So in fact, you read North Korea's news and watch their documentaries, these individuals who have left are criminals. They are also rapists, murderers, child molesters, according to North Korea's documentaries. And as most individuals kind of engage with such allegations on a moral level, condemning such a thing, North Korea utilizes that as a way to encourage audiences to condemn these defectors. So these are morally questionable subjects, and under the eyes of North Korea, these individuals are unworthy, 인간쓰레기, human garbage. Now, those allegations are, of course, untrue, but that is what North Korea puts forward. So to avoid the hypocrisy inherent in North Korea's critique of human rights, right, that you haven't been here, so you can't say what's going on here, North Korea tries to grant access to its citizens, but it's what I call access without access. Okay, so we also have access without access with these man on the street interviews. So you can see the microphone. And of course, these are screenshots from videos. And I don't have time to go into all the videos now, but North Korea here is playing with one of the vital techniques that we see in the human rights advocacy playbook, which is in human rights, we mobilize civil society. We engage the international community, and the international community engages us. So that is what North Korea is trying to demonstrate here. We have an ersatz civil society speaking back to the international community and telling us, the international community, what they think of the Human Rights Report. And it appears as if they are individuals, but it is rather the North Korean state impersonating a domestic advocacy network. Unlike a network of advocates, these individuals are not speaking with the language of civil society, but with that of the state, which has thrown its voice into them like a ventriloquist. So for North Korea, their greatest strength and weakness rests in one singular argument leveled repeatedly at the United Nations, which pertains to access. You haven't seen our violations directly, so you cannot say they exist. And this is a core feature which will appear again and again in a lot of these video allegations. So by creating an ersatz civil society, North Korea tries to address the demand of the United Nations, which is please grant us access. North Korea is giving the international community what it has been demanding, but of course on its own terms. So the ersatz civil society created in this process introduces a tricky variable in the spiral model associated with human rights advocacy, because the domestic society advocating for rights are in fact advocating for the state. So these are examples of access without access, and in my forensic analysis of these videos, I was able to identify signs of manipulation in the footage itself and in the editing. So for instance, there were lots of jump cuts in the audio as well, and changes in light, et cetera, et cetera. So each of these voices of these gentlemen is an individual, but the voices that they say, the words and phrases, that they say are types, and they embody a type of argument which is put together by North Korea. So for example, in the upper left, the man says, well, the Human Rights Report is a hypocrisy of the United States. The man in the upper right says, we'll look at the failures of the Republic of Korea. The man in the bottom right says, the socialist system of North Korea creates a benefit for all. And the man on the bottom left says, we have a diversity of voices here, and we have wonderful human rights. The US should speak for itself. So all of these messages perfectly echo what the North Korean state says in its own rhetoric. So again, we have this classically totalitarian phenomenon of a singularity masquerading as a multitude. And we can see these same cases happening elsewhere. So for instance, with Hong Kong and Taiwan, we have rights activists who are captured and used for forced confession videos. And they, again, are echoing precisely what the state has ask them to say. So they are denouncing their own activities. They are revealing where money was received from, and they are denouncing the human rights activities as false. So they use it to spread Chinese state propaganda about human rights funding and activities and the agenda. Here are just some screenshots also related to Uyghur police dancing before a sign that is about psychological support from the Chinese state. Here we have a celebration of life by inmates. Here we have in a re-education center in a Uyghur camp in Xinjiang. The body is involved, the voice is involved, the features associated with democratic rights activism. So you have individuals speaking on behalf of themselves, but in fact, rights are undercut. Protests are undercut, if you will, through these subtle maneuvers. Here is a celebration of graduation from a Uyghur re-education center. So here we have the state advocating for itself, using tools typically found in the Human Rights Advocacy Toolbook. You have witness testimony, witness footage, eyewitness accounts, victim accounts, evidence, live streaming, it's user-generated content, crowdsourced video, social media. So I'm just going to show one or two videos here, which are from China. And what I've noticed, similar to the North Korean case, it's often in response to an important public figure or entity critiquing human rights in Xinjiang or in North Korea or in Russia or whatever the case is. We'll see in the case of Taliban in a moment. So I'll just share this video with you.
学的是护理学专业。这2天，我从网上看到蓬佩奥开始对我们新疆指手画脚，说中国对新疆的维吾尔族及其他少数民族实行强制绝育。对此，我非常气愤。蓬佩奥，你真是在胡说八道。我们家有4个孩子，如果真的被强制绝育，那我们是从哪儿来的？我们3个孩子都在上学，我们学校也有很多像我们这样的维吾尔族学生在接受良好的高等教育。看到如今家乡的变化，我也不禁感叹，原来的驴车、马车都被淘汰了，现在家家户户都是摩托车、电动车和小汽车。现在有大病医疗保险，我们不再害怕得病，全民免费体检，也要我们更加关注自己的身心健康。从我们现在的幸福面貌来看，蓬佩奥他是在羡慕和嫉妒，他想破。
So I'll end that video of the critique of Pompeo there. I am geographically jumping around a little bit here, but let me show you, because these are all very contemporary cases. You will recognize this individual.
On Monday, Belarusian authorities released a video of Protasevich confessing to having organised anti-government demonstrations. Exiled Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya said the footage showed Protasevich had been tortured.
And then I'll just show you one more, again, jumping around a little geographically, but another contemporary case.
What proves our claims, which is the dissatisfaction of the people from the Taliban, especially women, isn't real. So it's not logical that the world don't recognize Afghanistan with recognition and may this protect and have other sinister goals. So our reason for proving this claim, which people, all of Afghanistan people, men and women.
So it's quite difficult to hear that audio. I'm sorry about that, but I think you get the basic ideas. Let me just continue back to the PowerPoint for a moment. And I'm going to explain how I found a lot of these cases. I've used open source, and I have been examining CCTV footage. There's also drone, satellite, forced confession videos where they appear on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Weibo. 2 websites have been particularly helpful for me, in addition, are Bellingcat and Forensic Architecture. I'm sure many of you are familiar with these websites, but if you're not, I definitely encourage you to take a look, as they have been doing incredible work. when I'm examining these cases, this is basically what I'm trying to do with each of them. I'm using forensic visual and audio analysis. I haven't been able to go into the details of it with you here today, but what that basically means is going frame by frame in the video and in the audio file and looking at how they're combined, how they're put together. Basically, what we see is a phenomenon whereby through edit analysis, the second point, jump cuts, frame twists, splicing, the material is being produced in post-production. In other words, it's being curated after the fact. Again, I'm sorry about that noise that you can probably hear the drilling. I'll just try to speak up a little bit. Also, I look at content analysis of the video capture. So for instance, what is in the video? Is it a body double? Is it a replica? Are these jokes? Are these theatrical performances, props, and omissions? You'll see how that relates in a moment when I show you some more historic cases. And also I perform critical discourse analysis. Critical discourse analysis, CDA, basically just refers to how power operates in speech. And also I look at tracing amplification. So when a video appears on BBC or CNN or CGTV, where else is it being picked up? Let me just move quickly to some historic cases, just because I found these so fascinating, the historic cases. So for instance, again, from East Asia, this is made in 1943. The film is called Calling Australia, and it was made by the Japanese Imperial Army. And in this case, they used Australian prisoners of war in Java, Indonesia, to persuade Australia to join the greater East Asian co-prosperity sphere. Another historic case, this is in the fall of 1944, the Nazis made a propaganda film in Theresienstadt, a ghetto and concentration camp in the then Nazi-occupied region of the former Czechoslovakia. The film, a portion of which is featured here, seemed to show Jews happy and thriving in their new quote-unquote settlement. The camp was described as a spa town where elderly Jews could retire in safety, and in fact is still used today. These videos are still used today, even though they're under a kind of banned, forbidden film category. They're still used today to deny atrocities of the Holocaust. The earliest case I found is from the Soviet Union, the Soloviki Special Prison Camp, which was set up in 1923. This video itself is from 1927. The Solovki Islands are in the White Sea, and this prison was set up as a remote and inaccessible place for detention, primarily intended for socialist opponents of Soviet Russia's new Bolshevik regime. So I'm coming to the end here. Let me just share my main findings, which are that states have used video to deny culpability for rights violations for decades on decades. There's increasingly savvy use of video to magnify messages of innocence circulated on reputable news outlets, the use of social media platforms for amplification, such as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Weibo. But also it's primarily used by norm-violating states, but not exclusively. Now, the final link that I want to bring in here connects us back to the idea of human rights and video activism. Some of you might remember the beating of Rodney King, and this was filmed on camera. It was one of the rare instances of white police violence toward an African-American man, which was filmed. It didn't lead to justice in the case of Rodney King, but it did lead within the human rights activist community to this idea of, for instance, this organization, witness.org, which says, see it, film it, change it. This idea that if we capture something on film, we can bring some justice, that we can change things a little bit. But what my work shows, somewhat concerningly, is that states are using video toward their own ends. They are manipulating citizens to speak on behalf of the state, and that all is not so simple in terms of technology leading to democracy and improved human rights.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Horns of a Dilemma, and please don't forget to visit our website at tnsr.org.